Hi boys, we're going to look at question 2. Question 2 from the recent task was explain how overtraining can be avoided. And again, a 4-mark question. I'll just direct you again to our rubric here. I'm not going to go through each of them again, but they're important for you to have a look at so that you can apply that into your responses. So explain how overtraining can be avoided. Our dot point that we're looking at is planning to avoid overtraining, the amount and the intensity of training, physiological considerations, e.g. lethargy and injury, psychological considerations, e.g. the loss of motivation. You'll learn too, ask you to analyse overtraining by considering questions such as how much training is too much, how would you identify an overtrained athlete, what would you do if you identify an overtrained athlete, and specifically how can overtraining be avoided. So that's the areas that we're looking at with from our syllabus. Explain, we're looking at relate cause and effect, make the relationships between things evident, provide the why and how. So in this case, we're trying to show the relationship between training, the effects of overtraining on the athlete, and specifically how we can avoid those. So what are some strategies that we can put into place to avoid overtraining from happening? If we look at our rubric, here's our rubric here. For you to get 4 marks, you needed to make evident the role of planning and how it can be used to avoid overtraining. So you're actually being proactive in avoiding that overtraining to happen. So you need to plan so that it doesn't occur. There were a couple of boys who discussed in their responses that how overtraining had already occurred and what they should have done, but it should be to prevent it. Now you need to provide relevant examples and present ideas in a clear and logical way. Again, most boys did very well in this response, and most boys were able to get 4 out of 4. Some things that you needed to include in your response: the amount and the intensity of training, and in their discussion here, terminology like volume and intensity were things that you needed to include. In terms of the physiological considerations, so we're talking about the effects upon the body and how the body operates. We're looking at lethargy and injury. So here you could talk about the use of some of the recovery strategies that may be able to be utilised. You might have spoken about nutrition. That would have been something else that you could have looked at. Hydration, observation by the coach in terms of illness, tiredness that may have been experienced by the athlete. Some things in here you could have used, the tool that you could have used to prevent might have been the RPE scale, the rate perceived exertion. So when players experience and provide feedback to the coach and the trainers to prevent the physiological effects of overtraining from happening. In terms of the psychological considerations, we're looking at the loss of motivation and some of the effects around that. And the major feature there that you could have spoke about in prevention was a variety of changing, maybe change of environment. Those sorts of things should have been considered in your response. In looking at a really good response here, this response shows, again, clearly that I like the underlining. It makes it clear and easy for me to read, or the marker to read, that they've got the 3 elements that they're talking about. The amount and intensity of training. They've talked about what that can, what the effects of that is. They've used some good terminology: volume and intensity of training, less strenuous, optimal recovery. In terms of the physiological considerations, showing signs of fatigue and ways to reduce that. We've talked about recovery techniques, relaxation, massage and meditation. Good examples of ways that you can prevent overtraining from occurring in terms of the physiological elements. In terms of the psychological elements here, with loss of motivation, which has been explained, change in environment and use of variety, again using different forms of training to maintain that interest and motivation for the athlete. So there's a good example of a response that was a 4 out of 4. As I said, most boys were able to do that.